Preston, welcome to the podcast, my man. How are you doing?
Good, Nick. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Not too bad for a Monday. Mondays typically go one of two ways. They're either really bad or they're really great. I think today's a case of a really great Monday, so I can't complain.
That is, that's why we play the game, you know?
Exactly. Preston, if someone has just clicked on this video and they're not familiar with who you are, what Chubbies is, or anything, why do you think they should stick around and listen to what you have to say and listen to your story?
I mean, I'm just some random dude. So if you want to listen to some random dude who happened to help start a brand that makes tiny shorts for men and now makes a bunch of other cool stuff for humans, and made a bunch of mistakes doing it, but ultimately was blessed enough to be a part of an exit for over $100 million and a brand doing over $100 million and growing still like a weed, then maybe you want to stick around, or at least do the little scan on YouTube where you look for little areas and maybe go through the chapters a little bit. But there might be some good stuff in here. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? Yeah, that's very fair. So Preston, tell me, man, what do a bunch of Stanford kids know about short shorts?
Nothing, nothing really, I would say. But yeah, I mean that's we were just buddies. We were buddies from college, and I'd say we were entrepreneurs in search of a business. We just didn't want to work for other people, and we weren't going to start Instagram or Snapchat. All of us played. We're generally associated with shorter shorts in some way. I played rugby at Stanford. Tom and Kyle played soccer, and Rainer um, grew up in a variety of places, but spent a lot of time growing up in the South, where shorter shorts were generally, more the norm. So we all had a tie to it, and I just thought we thought at the time there was a men's fashion was in a, not that we're fashion people. I mean, but felt like it was in a state of disarray, and just had a really messed up vibe that was inconsistent with who we were as people, and we just kind of felt like there was nothing that was making it fun, speaking to people like us. It was very serious and very kind of like traditional BS, and it felt like there was something that could be fixed there, and luckily it seems like we weren't alone.
When you say that you didn't want to work a 9 to 5, when did that first kick in? Like when did you first realize, you know what, a typical corporate job is not for me?
Man, that's a good question. I think it was, well, for me, it was probably right at graduation when I was trying to find a job and I was interviewing, you know, having to put on a suit and go step into these places where it's like, man, I don't belong here, but I feel like I'm just doing it because this is what smart people do. And I feel like an idiot going into these, whatever, case interviews. Just like, is this what I'm going to do in my life? So there was that probably from the beginning where it's just like, I don't think I'm a fit for this like consulting, investment banking, venture capital path. And so then ended up, first job was at a startup started by a few classmates, and it was kind of like felt alive, where it kind of just like felt like you could mold it, and that it was all up to you, and that like the opportunity was somewhat unbound if you just like put in the work and found solutions, didn't come up with excuses. And then and then I'd say like it kind of came back, 4 to 5 years in, when it was just like, okay, like I feel like I've learned some stuff, made a bunch of mistakes, and but I feel like I'm a little bit deadly. And I think the other three founders, excuse me, kind of felt similarly, where it was like, okay, I think we can go out and do this ourselves, kind of thing. And so it was maybe those two instances where it was really clear.
And, I mean, we joke, I joked around in the beginning of the pod, what do a bunch of Stanford kids know about short shorts? But it is, Chubbies. Listen, I'm a big Chubbies guy. I probably have like at least 4 to 5 pairs in my closet right now. Um, but like you mentioned, there was the gap in the market of it seemed like consumer brands were taking themselves too seriously and nobody was having fun with it. It was that just the original vision. It was like, hey, we're gonna create this brand that is more fun. Or I'm just trying to get a feel for what the original vision was when you guys were launching Chubbies.
Yeah. Well, I do think there was like one of the ideas that was being explored was like had a product tied to it that, like if you put yourself back in 2011, this was like, Jersey Shore and Abercrombie and Fitch were kind of like the two main things at the time from like a cultural milieu perspective, right? So like Jersey Shore was just, like cargo shorts down below your knees, and these like tight Ed Hardy or Affliction shirts and just like this look. And then Abercrombie's cool now, but back in the day it was kind of weird, but it was kind of cultish too. Like it was just this vibe of, you've got these two dudes standing in front of the walkway to the store and no shirts on, and there's like this horrible house music playing. It wasn't even house music. I don't know what you would describe. It was just bad music. And so just like the vibe was totally, totally weird. So it kind of felt like there was a product gap, if you will, and that like we couldn't get shorts we wanted to wear ourselves unless we went to Goodwill or got things that were handed down from our dads, kind of thing. And then kind of like a brand gap as well, where it just kind of felt like, yeah, we could just totally do it differently. This is so broken. So I think it was a little bit of both of them, and then I think the other piece was like an homage to our dads in some way, where like we just had these awesome pictures of our dads from, I don't know, 70s, 80s, when they were on spring break or in Mexico or wherever, like on the beach, just wearing some rad shorts, sideburns, mustaches, just like that vibe where it's just like, man, there's like something aspirational about that totally doesn't exist. Where it kind of felt like, yeah, there's like this aspirational masculinity that kind of, it was like, why is it so different today? So there was a little bit of that as well. Um, the other thing I would say is Shopify had just effectively become something that was a viable product, which is crazy, right? It took the cost of getting an e-com store from like $1 million, and you had to like spend 6 months and ton of engineers coding something, own your own servers, do that whole thing. Whereas you could just like click a couple buttons and you could start transacting online. Square, oddly enough, like it seems obvious now, and there's Venmo and blah blah blah, but like the Square card reader had just become a thing, so you could now just like take credit cards. So there were some of these like technological tailwinds that were happening as well. So all those things, I think, at the same time, coupled with, I mean, it seems like the best idea we got. We don't want to work for other people, so let's just try it.
You mentioned solving your own problem, and I was actually, funny enough, thinking about Shopify and the story of how Shopify started before you just mentioned it. But now that you mentioned it, this is just even more perfect. But I don't know if you've heard like the starting story of Shopify, but essentially, I forget, the founder wanted, I'm going to butcher the story, but the founder wanted to like sell skis maybe, or snowboards or
Yeah,
something.
snowboard stuff. Yep.
Snowboards, yeah, there you go. And so for him, it was solving his own issue. He was like, wait, like this is pretty difficult to get a store up and running and to get all the back end stuff organized. So he started Shopify, and now Shopify is what it is. And on in a similar manner, like you guys wanted these short shorts that you couldn't find anywhere. You also wanted to pay tribute to your dads and the style and influence from the 70s and 80s. The reason I bring all this up is because I think a lot of people, and I see it all over X and other platforms, like, oh, if only I had a good business idea, if only I had some idea that I could work towards. I was actually just having a conversation with a friend, and their biggest thing was, well, I just don't know what to do. Like I like, and maybe they have several ideas, but there's not that one that sticks out. And I always tell people is like, okay, create something that you yourself would want. And
Yep.
With this podcast, for example, like I've created this podcast because this podcast is something I would really want. Like I want a podcast where it's the host just talking to athletes and founders and entrepreneurs, basically marrying the world of sports and business.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all. That's it. That's the entire podcast. And I don't know. Like the advice seems so simple, but yet people struggle so much with it. And I'll end it on this note because I really want your thoughts on this. But like for example, like I'm a huge tennis player. I love playing tennis. But I live in Florida. The big problem for whatever reason in Florida is that there's barely any indoor tennis courts. Like
Mm.
I don't think I've seen a single public indoor tennis court. And I don't know if it's just the business model or what the reasoning is. But I was like, man, if I could open up an indoor tennis court, I would solve so many of my issues. Because Florida in the summer, first of all,
Oh
not
yeah.
pleasant. Second of all, it rains every afternoon. So there's that added barrier. So I'm
Right.
like, dude, I could play every single day with my friends under AC. Like this would be
Yep.
heaven on earth. Um, why do you think people struggle with just that advice of like solve your own problems and let that be your guiding light?
The first thought that comes to mind is that they don't think it's potentially a big enough idea, or they're not even asking themselves that question, right? Where there's potentially a an assumption that you as a human cannot mold the world kind of thing. Like I think there's like this deep down thing that we all have to a certain degree where it's just like, the people who started these things, they're different from me, they're better than me. There's something special about them that allowed them to create something that didn't previously exist. And that then becomes a blocker. And then we can come up with a million reasons why we're not going to do the thing, or why the thing wouldn't work, or why the idea isn't good enough, right? And just whatever. You can come up with an infinite number of examples or reasons. But then there are, I think, some people who are just like the people who created everything. Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, any person who runs a business, whatever. Like they're all just as imperfect human beings as me. Like we're all just humans. We all put on our pants the same way. We all get headaches. We're all just stupid humans that are totally imperfect. And there's nothing that about us that keeps us from being able to create a company. Because all it is trying to find something that people want to buy at the end of the day. You know what I mean? And that's pretty easy to do. It's hard, obviously, but it's possible. Like anyone can do it, sort of thing. So I think that's something I've maybe thought about a little bit, and I don't know if that's even a good answer, but it's just something I've thought about. Where there's this one video that I saw, an old Steve Jobs video, where it's like one of his earliest, and he's kind of talking about uh, this idea that one of the most important realizations he had is that, kind of like what I was trying to articulate. He said it a lot better because he's Steve Jobs, but he was just like the fact that this whole world around us was created by people no smarter than you and I. And then once you realize that you, as much as anyone, have the ability to mold and shape it. And I was like, shit, that's awesome. Like there's no reason why I can't do it. And not that everything's going to be a success, blah, 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 but there's nothing that's a blocker that is like fundamental about me as a human as being inadequate or unable to take the shot.
I don't know if you're familiar with Sam Parr or My First Million, but pretty popular business podcast.
Of course.
And yeah. I feel like anyone in the business world is probably heard of it. But
Tom, my co-founder, and I, we actually, so that YouTube account used to be, I think it was like, used to be the HustleCon account. And then it turned into My First Million. So,
yeah.
so Tom and I spoke at a HustleCon conference many, many, many moons ago. And I've always been a fan of Sam, and he's done an amazing job. And currently, the My First Million podcast is amazing. But just a little bit of a small world note there.
Yeah, no, definitely. But Sam talks about, and he's probably referring to maybe you even in this sense, which I would take it as a compliment. But he was saying how he would be around all these entrepreneurs and all these people building businesses. And one of the things he realized is that they were making, throwing out random numbers here, they were making 100x what he was currently making, but they were not 100 times smarter than he was. So
Right.
that gave him the confidence to be like, all right, there are some people, right, where the fire burns a little brighter,
Sure.
and there's certainly outliers, but vast majority, like you were saying, they may be making millions more, but guess what? They're not, 100 IQ points smarter than you are. So that gave him confidence to kind of chase after it and be like, all right, if they can do it, I can do it too. And what's interesting about humans is I brought up this story on the podcast in the past, but I just love it so much. Alex Hutchinson wrote this book called Endure, which is mostly focuses on the science of endurance, how to reach your peak performance. But he has a section in there where he talks about the Kentucky Derby and how at the
Mm.
Kentucky Derby, within like the last 50 years or so, the winning time has not changed over the last 50 years that much. It has not improved. But he talks about how humans, it seems like seemingly every week somebody breaks a world record or, the first man to run the 4 minute mile. And he says that the difference is that humans will see other humans do something that they once thought was impossible. But since somebody else went and did it, they now think, oh, like a 4 minute mile is possible. And so it's interesting how we're wired to think that certain things are impossible until somebody else does it. And then we're like, oh, I can do it. So I guess maybe just talks to the importance of surrounding yourself with like minded people.
That's such an interesting example. I love that so much because then it's just like, well, it's interesting. It's who you surround yourself with, but then it's also like the power of what's in between the ears. You know what I mean? Of just like how much comes down to, or how much is possible, just with belief. You know what I mean? Not like God complex stuff or just being like reckless, right? Because I think sometimes people who are maybe more in the I just need my 9 to 5, I need that steady paycheck, blah blah blah, totally reasonable, but they might frown on people who are like, no, I can create this, I can do this thing, but it's like, no, I mean, it's like it's it's possible, it's totally possible, and then yeah, when you see it and then you connect it to the fact that that's just a human, that's just a human, then it it's the unlock, right? It's the classic 4 minute mile. But then to your point, you're like, well, but then there's this other example with the horse side of things. And I love that example. Another, just a super quick note. I was watching this documentary on Usain Bolt, and I think about the guy, and I'm like, that guy is God's gift to speed, right? He is perfect specimen. He must have never had an injury, blah blah blah. All of these excuses, and I'm not going to say at all that I can go to win a gold in the 100 meter, obviously. But one of the things I thought was so cool, and you learn this about every athlete. I assume it maybe has come up in a bunch of podcasts. The guy had like all of these issues, right? All these body imbalances, all of these like inefficiencies in the way that he ran, like all these like fundamental like spine issues too, not to mention all these crazy injuries he had to come back from that were very close to competition time. But I think as humans, we can also just be like, yeah, they did it. I've seen them do it. But again, they probably didn't have, name your thing, asthma, or name your like stupid made up thing that is not stupid made up, that is real, but that they all had, they all had to deal with. They all found a way around. They found a solution. And so I don't know. I kind of love that too. It's like seeing other people do it, becoming certain that it is possible, and then making that final connection that I think is no, they didn't have it easy. They didn't have a perfect road. They probably had to deal with more crap than you've had to deal with, and they found a way through. And it's kind of like lights a nice little fire under your ass when you realize that that's the truth.
I couldn't agree more. Two examples come straight to mind. Last podcast guest, Justin Britt, he was the offensive lineman for the Seahawks. He talks about, and he's been a pretty strong advocate for mental health, especially in men. And he came on the podcast, was super honest and transparent, and just said, "Listen, during the end of my NFL career, like I was heavy in depression, filled with anxiety, like mental health was not good." And I think as fans, specifically for, sports, is like we look at these athletes, to kind of to your point, we view them as superhuman, as indestructible. Like, there's nothing wrong with them, or, life was set up perfectly for them. They had everything presented to them on the silver platter. But the more you dig into it, the more you realize that it's actually the complete opposite. But what made them successful was their ability to turn some of those circumstances and those challenges into positives, and just keep moving and keep pushing. I alluded to my huge tennis fandom, but one of my favorite players of all time is Novak Djokovic, which I don't know if you're into tennis, but
For sure.
arguably the greatest tennis player of all time. He, and people forget this, like he struggled immensely in hot, humid situations,
Hmm.
just hot environments in general at the beginning of his career. And I still remember as a kid watching the Australian Open and watching him like lift his arms up to try and get oxygen into his lungs because he couldn't breathe because it was so hot, and do all these exercises. And he's documented his struggles with, like, listen, like I used to be, afraid of playing in these environments because I knew what was going to happen. I just wasn't fit enough to play in these environments. And now he's arguably the greatest tennis player of all time, has won the most Grand Slams ever on the men's side. I mean, there's an example right there of someone who had to go through it
For
and really
sure.
work on themselves. So I don't know. I love that point that you bring up, that it seems, I'm sure people have said probably for you and your co-founders, like, oh yeah, like, oh yeah, they had it easy. Like, of course, like who, Chubbies, like short shorts for men, like, oh, like what an easy idea, right? But I'm sure you would you laugh because I'm sure that there's a lot that you want to say to that.
Oh yeah. It's a horrible business. It's the smallest TAM. There's so many things wrong. It's so seasonal. It's There are a million reasons why it doesn't make sense. It is really a really hard business to run. So there's obviously so many great things, and we're so blessed. But just like it's uh, so much of the time was like, why did we choose this? Why? Why have we done? What do we do? This was the worst decision. But then obviously there's always something there, and then part of it is like uh, a big part of this life is like just committing. Like there are infinite ways to success. You can always jump to the shiny object thing, but it's like if you view this from like the full arc of your life, it's like no, like yeah, maybe there's a more perfect. I wish I started this. I wish I started. Name your other brand, whatever, but you didn't. So what are you gonna do? you know, like let's make this work. Let's make this the best that it can possibly be, because anything can be exceptional in its own way. Anything can get better. And that's the stuff of life, right? I mean, that's like the nut of it all when you're like looking back from your deathbed. It's just sort of like, well, did I take what I was given and make the most of it? And everyone's answer is no, but did I did I show up every day trying to do that? And did I give that my all? Then that's I think something that we can actually try to get closer to saying yes to.
I think it'd be useful for the audience if you outlined some of the self-limiting beliefs that either you or any of your co-founders had, and how you overcame some of those.
The first one that comes to mind is that that this can't be a big business. I mean, they're clearly massive businesses that are many, many billions of dollars. But honestly, I never thought that Chubbies could be driving over 100 million of revenue a year, or 150. Like, I thought that was impossible. I just didn't think that existed. And all credit to the other founders and to the whole team. but it is. I mean, and so thinking that there was like this much lower ceiling to what we could create, I think was maybe one of the biggest ones, because it kind of takes the wind out of your sails a little bit, where you kind of lose the fire for what you're doing, especially as you're like 5, 6 years into the thing, and you're just like, man, this is a slog. This is a grind. What about like, look at this person who already sold their company. Look at this person who already sold their company. That being one. Two, for me at least, I can't speak for the others, but just like viewing money as the definition of success. Like that we're not successful or we don't have value until we've sold the business. Where in a lot of ways you could say you never want to sell a great business, right? You just want to be able to hold on to it forever because it's an amazing asset. But it's not like we were idiots or failures until some other person like decided that we want to buy the thing. And so I think just much more focused on like internal validation, like are we doing the best possible thing for our customer rather than God, this sucks because we haven't we tried to sell the business or we tried to do XYZ and it didn't work. This is doomed to fail. This is not a success. This is not, just like these things that can bring us down and burn us out that are completely disconnected from the truth, which is like it is such a gift, to be able to work with people you love on something you can give your whole heart to, your whole body to, your whole mind to, that is meeting a need, that, people liked the thing. They liked the product. They liked the brand. They liked being a part of the community. Like that's when you think about like the three core things that truly matter. It's not some paycheck. It's not some external validation. It's like the core of it, like the day to day, the grind, the fire drills, the whatever, because you're working on something you care about with people you love, and it's hard and it's all encompassing. Like that's like as good as it gets. So losing sight of that was problematic.
What were any fire drills that stand out?
I mean, the main thing that stands out is like every day was a fire drill kind of thing. Like there was just something broken in a big way every single day. And it's just like, okay, here we go. The next one, on the next one. And it kind of helps in that, I mean, some things are obviously bigger than others, but to kind of get to a place where, in some ways, you kind of look at things without placing a bunch of weight on it. Like, this thing happened. Okay, what do we do about it? What's the best thing we can possibly do? Great. It is what it is, kind of thing. Whereas, we can just have all of this fear, or what do you call it? Catastrophization or something like that. We're catastrophizing, where it's just like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. We're like, no, a new one's going to happen tomorrow. So let's just go. Let's just attack it in the best way we can. But man, there were certainly a couple big. We had some like big. I wouldn't say they were like fire drills even, but like one that's coming to mind is more of like a structural problem, which was like for a period of time, we like our marketing just stopped working, like we just couldn't acquire customers anymore at the profit amount that we needed, at the profit level that we needed, right? It's just like what got us here definitely wouldn't get us there, but realizing that was really hard, right? Because it's just hard to come to that realization when you're in it so much, like as a business owner and as a business operator, to know like I shouldn't necessarily, like I got to take a big step back and completely reframe. Like maybe from a sports perspective, you gotta, when you go from college to the pros, like it's a nice demarcating factor where it's just like, shit, man, this is a completely different level. If I'm going to show up and if I'm going to win, I gotta be a different person. And like I kind of like that. For us, our going from college to the pros was like maybe like halfway in, like 5 years into the business. So let's say 2015, 2016, where we almost ran out of money. And from that point, it's like, well, very clearly what got us here isn't going to get us there. So we kind of got to reset this thing. And like, unfortunately, that meant we had to reduce our team size, like fire a bunch of people. And that's like a really, really painful, embarrassing, sad experience. And so, the lows are low, but that's all right. That's what kind of helps you appreciate the highs and just helps you appreciate life and feel life kind of thing. But there are too many to think about. But when I was, what I would say is when I was done with it, I missed that so much, right? Because it's just like something that grabs you, something that you can pour yourself into, and you're in it with other people, and it's very unifying, and it's fun to just be. When you don't have it, is the only time that you can really clearly look back on and just be like, man, that was awesome. Uh, and just like trying to stay in touch with, I guess like the advice I try to give myself now and the new thing that I'm doing is just try to stay in touch with the fact that this too will be gone. And remember the pain that you felt when it was gone the first time and you missed those hard times, those challenging times. And I would imagine there are some parallels to sports as well, where you're just like, ah, fuck, man, my, I just like, this hurts, this hurts, this hurts, but you got to show up and you got to play. But like, your career could be done any day, and you're going to be missing that like crazy, and you're just going to beg that you showed up today and played through the pain, kind of thing. It's got to be, there got to be some parallels there.
It's funny you bring that up because almost every single athlete that I've talked to has expressed the same exact thing, where after they leave their sport, they are almost lost for a certain period of time. Because for many of them, like they grew up practicing, playing their entire childhood. You get used to the competitive nature, going out every single week with with your brothers. It really ends up being a brotherhood. And they say how post sports, like there's nothing that can replace just that feeling. Like you guys are all in the field together. You're after one goal. You're there for the guy next to you. Like what job can replace that feeling? And it's actually it's such a big problem that there's organizations that have been formed to help athletes kind of go through the
Mm-hmm.
post during their retirement, go through and try to find a career and try to find some fulfillment.
Sure.
So it's a huge issue, and I imagine isn't it tough though, because like even with the podcast now, like there's days where I'm like, this sucks, like I really don't want to edit this video, or I really don't want to do this. And it's like, but like how do you constantly remind yourself like, oh, like this is the fun part, like the journey is the fun part, the destination, sure, it'd be great if we reach some milestone, but that's going to be fleeting. I'll be happy for maybe 10-15 minutes, and then I'll be on to the next thing. Really what matters is the journey. And like, as you were explaining, when you were in the mud and you were in the trenches and you were building and doing all these things, but like I just haven't found a good way to remind myself of that, and to just like really practice that.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if I have a great answer when you're actually in it. I'm still figuring that out, to be honest. But like what I try to do is come in contact with that memory, that feeling, right? Try to feel that feeling that I felt, feel that feeling I felt. Uh, and and then the other piece is like, I don't know, man, I kind of, there's like that Steve Prefontaine quote, right? Something along the lines of like, to give anything less than your absolute maximum is like to sacrifice the gift kind of thing. I'm butchering the quote probably, but I don't know, man. It's just like, and we can always come back to any of these quotes from any of these people, but there's such truth to them where it's like, man, we're, time is limited, dude. And we could get injured. We could have XYZ happen. And it's it's like, how can I just do the thing? Sometimes it's just like grind through, right? And for me, what helps there is routine, you know? Like that's what's so nice about having something that's like so all encompassing, and it's hard, like especially in like this remote work environment where you're not where like the routine is a little bit looser kind of thing. But just like I show up to this place at this time, and when I'm there, I'm present and I'm doing it. And and then I guess the other thing that has sometimes helped is just kind of like, and it's trite, but maybe it's just helpful to hear yet another person say the thing. It's just like, what do I want? You know? And then being clear, like having a pretty good answer where it's not just, I want to be a billionaire. But maybe that is the answer that gets you going. Uh, but just being clear on what I want, like what I'm trying to do here, because it can be so easy to just forget. Like, even like I'm at our little health club or whatever, and going through the motions versus like I'm here to be like I'm old. I'm about to be 40 and I do Olympic weightlifting. That's like my thing. That's how I stay feeling like I'm athletic. And so my goal is to be like national champion next year of my, because I turned 40. And so like a lot of the old dudes, they get injured or they give up or whatever, whatever. So gets a little easier to win. So I'm like, well, I can just show up and I can, move the weights, go through whatever the plan was, or I can just like remember in my mind like what I'm trying to do here, and like envision that thing happening, right? And it helps. Doesn't mean it's easy, right? A lot of this is just grinding through and just doing the thing, and that's okay because that's a lot of it's a lot of what life is. So like no easy answer, but those are just some of the things that I try.
First of all, you're not old. Second of all, um, Alex Ramosi had a really great framework on this, and it really changed the way that I view a lot of the, let's say, the tough days or the grind, as you called it. He said, "How boring of a story would it be if the hero just defeated the dragon first pass? You open up the book, you go to the first page, and it's like, the hero's great. The hero's super strong. He goes and he defeats the dragon. End of
Yeah, I like
story."
that. Mm-hmm.
How boring
Mm-hmm.
of a story would
That's
that
good.
be? Instead, you have the
Yeah,
whole
that's good.
hero's journey, right? And I have to think back to my 10th, 11th grade class to define the entire hero's journey. But it's like you have this person who's imperfect, who goes through some trials and tribulations, who gets stronger, who probably fails a couple times, and then in the end, it all comes together. He musters up the courage, he or she, and they go and defeat the dragon. And it's like, boom, what a story. And so like I remind myself of that too sometimes, where it's like, how boring would it be if I just woke up tomorrow and I had the number one podcast in the world
Mm-hmm.
and I could just get any guest that I could ever
Mm-hmm.
want without having to go through any of the struggle. And how boring of a story would that be if I were telling other people like, "Hey Nick, so like how did you build that podcast?" And my story is just like, "Oh, I just woke up one day and, had the number one podcast." They'd be like,
Totally.
"Oh, that's it?" Like that's kind of
Yeah.
stupid.
Right.
So I don't know. That's
And the
been helpful
reality
to
is
me.
you wouldn't really feel what you think you would feel when you had it. You know what I mean? Like, because whoever has that number one podcast, they're probably like, why aren't I bigger than George Clooney or like what? You know what I mean? It's just like no one ever feels the thing that you think they're gonna feel. Uh, I mean, yeah, when you win the Super Bowl, blah 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 blah, it probably feels great. But then like next day, it's like, but Jordan won this many. You know what I mean? So it's like that it's the it is that journey kind of thing. And then if we could, like one of my biggest lessons from just going through an experience where there was like an exit and kind of like just a change in that, where there was like that end point kind of thing, was kind of like what I was already hearkening back to, but it just really helped to reframe the fact that it's like, again, like the super trite thing, but it is the journey. Like it is all about that and the struggle, because the end thing, it's not going to be as cool as you think it is. And I think once you kind of realize that, it's like that it is like the craft of it. It is just like the showing up and doing it and finding these little micro optimizations, and and that is like the stuff of what makes life truly special. I think it kind of reframes the day to day a little bit. Like, because it's like, why is Elon Musk still working? You know, why are all these people still working? There's so many people who be like, once I get to my number, I'm gonna hang it up, and everything's gonna be good. But it's just like there's nothing that's not real at all. It's just like what for every person it's a different thing. But just the truth, I guess, is that like that made up end state. A, most people don't have it defined, and then B, if they've defined it, that I'll be happy when or I'll be a success when, it's wrong. So, but it all like one of the fundamental truths is like we're here, we've got this moment, like what are we going to do with it? And are we going to kind of take the perspective of what is the biggest challenge I can give myself? What can I learn? what can I, how can I run towards like learning and failure versus like, these are all the reasons why I shouldn't do it. These are all the reasons why it won't work. These are all of the blah, blah, blahs. But no, I love that Hermosi framing. That's rad. That's really cool. So then my version is probably just like the, uh, the end of the story that we kind of make up in our heads. A, it's not as good as we think it is, but B, it is only valuable if you've like gone through that horrible experience or earned it or just felt like, I mean, this is something I can truly cherish because I've felt the opposite for so long.
Yeah. One other thing that I've been thinking about is I see a lot of people, whether it's my friends or people online, chasing the goal of satisfaction and happiness and balance. Those seem to be some of the words that get thrown around. And I'll see people say, well, you just need to be happier. Or, for people who tend to work too much, they'll say, you just need to be more satisfied, like, be more grateful. And I was thinking about it. And, I was asking my friends this the other day. And I asked them, I was like, do you feel balanced? And I have a specific friend in mind who just ran a marathon, great job, has a great girlfriend. From an outsider's perspective, you could say that he has a balanced life. Like you have everything that you could ever possibly need. Has a roof over his head, can afford food, water. And I asked him, I was like, "Do you feel balanced?" And he was like, "Well, like I guess I don't really feel balanced." And then that got me thinking. So like, what does it mean to feel satisfied, or to like feel balanced, or to feel happy? And I came to the conclusion of maybe just our natural state is not to feel satisfied. Maybe if you were just satisfied all the time, that could actually probably be bad for you. Like that would be counterproductive. So maybe our natural state is not to feel satisfied all the time. There's perhaps moments where we may feel satisfied. But on a whole, I'd say that probably our natural state is to feel unsatisfied. Um, and then B, I sometimes think that most people think too deeply about some of these subjects and spend too much time worrying about, am I happy or am I satisfied? Not to discredit any of those questions, and not to say that you shouldn't be asking yourself, hey, am I happy? But if you start to think too much about it, then you almost get into this state of like, I don't think you can ever feel happy because you're always thinking about it. It's like you're never allowing yourself to feel that emotion because you're always stuck in your own head about, will this ice cream make me happy, or will this, business make me happy? So I don't know if any of that made sense, but I don't know. I guess I think that people think too much about it, and then B, maybe starting to come to the idea of maybe our natural state is not to be satisfied.
It totally resonates. I mean, one of the things I've thought about, I don't know if this is right, but just a feeling I have, is every single person on this planet has stuff that they complain about, that they think sucks. You know what I mean? And so I kind of been kicking around this idea that like there's a latent level of dissatisfaction or unhappiness or things that you can complain about that every person deals with. So then it's kind of like the whole classic like choose your hard. Like everyone's everyone's got hard stuff. And so then given that, if you assume that that's if there's some truth to that, then it's like, well then what? And then I guess one of the ways that I try to think about it is, okay, if everyone's got hard stuff, then what about other things that we want to focus on? Like whatever. For me, it's like gets me excited is like trying to invent something that didn't exist that helps people in some way where I think, I've got some unique ability or gift or set of historical lessons or mistakes that I've made in the past that just make me potentially one of the people uniquely suited to do that thing. And I derive a lot of like high level joy and satisfaction from just the gift of getting to do that, knowing that I have all of the complaints and dissatisfactions, but then you think about a person who you might like put at a level, whatever, 5 steps above you, and think, ah, man, they got it good, and they don't, they've got a bunch of other crap that sucks, and you probably don't want their problems right now. Like there's a lot of stuff that you're probably misunderstanding about, their situation. So I don't know. There's a little bit of like this idea that choose your heart. Are you pleased with your hard? Are you pleased with the things you're struggling with, the things you're complaining about, uh, and how you're gonna think about those things, when you're on your deathbed and you're looking back and you're like, am I proud of that? Am I proud of the things I chose to be hard, the challenges I chose? Are my kids proud of that? Like, do they look up to me? Am I having the setting the example that I want to set for my kids? Kind of thing. I don't know. I think those sorts of things uh are maybe guiding lights, but then I also just think, and I guess it's hard to put it in perspective, but just from the gratitude thing, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I have the right perspective on this, but tend to just think that, well, shit, man, so grateful for everything that, like, I got 2 arms, 2 legs, and not that I'm unlucky or not, wouldn't be grateful if I had 1 arm. Like, just being able to find things that where we can just tell ourselves a narrative of life is happening for me kind of thing. Because anyway, you can tell yourself the exact opposite story of life is happening to me or against me, or you can just view the exact same set of circumstances and just be like, man, this is why I'm great. I can be great. This is why I can have a unique impact on the world, on my family, uh, and so it's just kind of so funny that it's all how you frame it up.
Couldn't agree more. I mean, to bring him up again, but Hormozy has this other great framework where he says, um, if you can choose to be happy, or sorry, if you can choose to be sad easily, why not just choose to be happy?
Mm,
And um, basically just alluding to the fact that if it's easy for you to have a sad day, make it just as easy for you to have a great day. And I think that comes along with what you were saying with reframing and looking at it from a different lens and being like, you know what, this day could be terrible, but I have 2 arms, 2 legs. I can see, I can hear, I can smell. I have a roof over my head. I have food, water. Like all my basic necessities are covered. Um, what else could I ask out of this life?
yeah.
I don't know, that reframe I think can be super powerful for a lot of people. Preston, if you don't mind, because I want to be respectful of your time here, but I do want to
Hell
get
yeah.
some fan questions because I got some questions back. I posted actually this new thing that I'm doing that I'm trying out. I've been posting on Reddit. And I've been I'll just write up a post and be like, hey, interviewing one of the co-founders of Chubbies. What questions do you have for him?
Sweet.
And there's actually a lot of good questions that came in, so I'm excited to run some of these by you. Some of them are a little more tactical, and then I think some are more like big picture. But we could do these more kind of like rapid fire. Um,
Cool.
First question: was there a moment in time you knew Chubbies was going to work, or was the growth more gradual?
Both. both. Growth was very gradual. It was also not linear at all. But, and maybe this harkens back to maybe earlier part of the conversation, like irrational optimism of, I just kind of got to a place where there was just such momentum and excitement about what we were doing that it was just like, yeah, this is going to work. It's just like, let's find the way to make it work. So that would be maybe a quick rapid fire, but like it, it felt like maybe more than that. Like I never thought it work. Wouldn't work being defined as we would totally run out of money and not be a business anymore. Like go bankrupt, I guess, or shut it down. Uh, but I just didn't know how much it would. Like I thought we would just be failing all the time, and fear it just not going well, or letting down our customers, or just that we weren't doing XYZ thing good enough. So that was like a persistent fear, but it was always just kind of like, find a way, we'll find a way, whatever it is, we'll find a way.
You mentioned your customer, and this is actually a perfect follow up question. Basically, the question asks, especially in the beginning, were there any data driven pivots that Chubbies made based on customer feedback?
Countless. I mean, I think we tried. That's kind of like how we tried to operate. So what are a couple examples? This isn't going to be perfect, but one was just like understanding what would drive the most, what customer journey would drive the most customer lifetime value, like get you to purchase, basically bring you the most joy, and then you'd want to provide remuneration for the joy we were providing, right? So like what ideal first product, second product, third product combo were ideal for the customer journey, and then shaping your whatever, your marketing automation or your marketing efforts around that very specifically, that being number one. Number two, I mean, just very basic, like let's ask our customers what they want us to make. Let's throw out a bunch of ideas and have them tell us. And so like just kind of super basic surveying, things like that. Uh, so that's like digital data. I think one of the earliest things we did was just sell in person. So like not quite door to door sales, but our first products we sold were like in San Francisco, in person, at Fort Mason or at any one of the parks. I mentioned Square Card Reader, right? People would just come up to us because we were just a bunch of friends in tiny bright shorts. Like it looked very weird and different at the time. But just interacting with people, with potential customers in person, like that's data. That's a data driven decision based on customer feedback. You know what I mean? Like what angle are people resonating with? What products do they like? How do they talk about it? The people who say they hate it, why do they say they, all of that kind of stuff is just like so valuable. So it doesn't, I guess my point there is to do in-person stuff as much as you can, because that's probably where you learn the most, honestly, in the early days.
What did you realize that people hated, or what did you have to change based on that feedback?
Well, I think the funny thing about people hating what you're doing in general when you're talking about like a consumer brand is that that's a good thing, because your brand is clear enough to where there is something to hate. The real enemy is apathy, where people don't know what you are, what you stand for, and therefore there's not like an idea that's clear and salient enough to hate, to think is stupid, to think is whatever, to XYZ. So that reframe, very important from like a consumer brand perspective. Um, but then like the maybe not necessarily hated, but just like as it relates to things that maybe people who liked what we were doing but didn't like XYZ. Uh, Maybe like one example was a lot of, and this is I guess data driven as well from like a returns perspective, but a lot of people would, whether it be like wearing chubbies and then doing a workout, like squatting, a squat workout or whatever, they split the inseam. And so we obviously had like some product quality things we had to learn about and had to fix and XYZ. So I'm just saying pretty obvious stuff, but maybe the note on like people disliking you or getting hate or whatever, like not cowering from that. Like clearly, if you're doing something that's like truly angering people and it's like your fault and whatever, obviously be like a reasonable human. But it's like, no, I mean, I'm okay that people really don't like what we're doing because they're just not a fit for what we're doing. And that's actually a good thing because there are a lot of people who are a fit and they friggin' love it. And therefore, there have to be this like yes and no for there to be a strong community that you can build a brand around in the first place.
Did you have an ideal customer in mind when you guys first started out? Like, was that something that was
Yeah, it
well
was us.
defined?
It was,
Well, there you
I
go.
mean, it
Yeah.
wasn't for a long time. No, it wasn't on paper. It was just the four of us as humans, just making it for ourselves. So like we were basically just making stuff for ourselves. And there were four of us and we were all very different in our own little way. So it kind of provided nice little whatever customer avatars or archetypes or whatever people call it these days. But yeah. And it gets back to your earlier point that like you know what you want, you know what you like, you know what you don't like. Like that matters. That is more than enough of a guide because I can tell you there are more than enough people who are like you, who are not getting served by whatever the current incumbent thing is. You're not one person. Now, that first idea you come up with where you're like, this sucks. I'm going to start a business around that. I like provide a reasonable filter on top of it, of course, but I would probably be more forward leaning on, yeah, I could turn that into a business than, it won't work because you're going to learn something in the process. And that's ultimately like what the goal is.
I watched this Gary V video back from, I don't know, it must have been like '08 or maybe 2010. And back then he was saying, social media, it's going to be this big thing and you're not going to believe it, but people are going to make hundreds of thousands of dollars talking about, knitting or talking about whatever, niche topic, insert your favorite niche topic. And people back then were like, "Oh, you're crazy! Like that's never going to work." And here we are. So to your point, like you'd be surprised how many people there are like you who want a similar thing, but it just doesn't exist. And really, that's the bet. Like in my eyes, like if you make something for yourself, the bet that you are placing is that there are other people like you, and that is a pretty good bet. Like that bet will win a
Totally.
lot. Um,
Totally.
so
The
I think it's
nuance, the
a
nuance that I might offer that maybe this is useful for the audience is, yeah, it's like, what do you not like? That's great. That's like a problem space to explore. But then the solution, it's not just immediately like jumping to the solution that might be the solution that works the best. It's like an empathy exercise. Like it's like a constant empathy exercise where it's like, why do I want it? Like what there's like many more questions I think to going deeper. Or as you're thinking about like how am I going to market this thing? It's that exploration I think it maybe gets lost in the whole conversation around, just like make a product for yourself kind of thing. But then there's like the whole like positioning and how do you make people care about it and want to be a part of it and how do you talk about it and what words do you do like all of that does the nitty gritty details when it ultimately comes down to it that is like it requires a few clicks that I think like the takeaway would be like how do I not just put myself into my shoes and just write the thing I want to write right now, but like what really addresses what I need, why I need it in such a way where like I haven't yet come to the realization that I have right now that this is the needed thing. And so there's some nuance there that maybe by passing that along, um, it helps the people listening to this be a little bit more successful in getting their thing off the ground.
This question, a couple more here, and then we'll close out. This question refers to a lot of what you were just saying, which I believe is tied to brand. I actually really like this question because selfishly, this is something that I've been thinking about in terms of this podcast. Question says you emphasize the importance of brand as a long-term moat. How should founders balance short-term performance marketing with long-term brand building?
Yeah, that's like the trillion dollar
The age-old,
question. For
right?
sure, for sure, for sure. I think my maybe the unique take that I can apply here is that it was a legitimately the biggest problem that we dealt with while we were building Chubbies, and it's always going to be a question, a problem, um, and the but what I can say is that the answer is probably not what any brand is doing today. Like generally, every brand is over indexing on like the short term. I need to get the transaction today. I need to do my bottom funnel conversion optimized type stuff. So that's probably the answer. And then like, well, then what do I do with that? It's well, like the fundamental truths of growing any kind of a business, right? Brand, ecom, whatever it might be, is I gotta hit more people, and then I gotta hit them with content that gets them to remember me and know what I do and remember me to where, when they come in market, when they're shopping for our thing, they automatically choose us, right? Very basic, but like it's amazing how quickly we can forget that truth. You know what I mean? And but it doesn't make it easy. And the problem is that this question probably comes from someone who knows ecom or knows, selling products and stuff like that. Is that the way you measure the success of like the short termy stuff? It's a lot quote unquote easier to measure. Not that it's correct, but you get measure, you get data. So it's largely a measurement problem. And so like speaking to what has been this whole conversation is like that's what I'm working on now post Chubbies. Is like taking what was the biggest problem for us as operators of the brand, and like this next chapter of my life is devoting it to building tools that other brands can use to measure this and make that, find that balance. Because like in the end of the day, it should probably be 50-50, like brand building to performance marketing, like the balance, right? And because like if you only do the conversion-y stuff, that runs out. I don't know if it's going to take 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever, but it runs out like fundamentally. So, but there's really no tools, no platforms to help with that. And so that's like what I'm working on now with this company called Marathon, with the general idea being like that building these businesses is like a marathon, not a sprint. But it's like a perfect example. Like I mean, it could not work. I mean, I think it's working and it is working because a lot of customers use it. But it was this whole thing of like, well, because it didn't, nothing like this existed. And I was like, well, why doesn't it exist? Like, is it just too hard? Is it not a need? Is it blah, blah, blah? But we just kind of, my co-founder Tom and I, who co-founded Chubbies with me, we're just like, well, we dealt with it. Seems like some other people are interested just as we talked to them. We know about this stuff. Like we dealt with it firsthand. Let's just start. And what we're working on now is very different than what we were originally thinking of working on. It's changing dramatically as we interact with customers and see what they want and see what people are actually using. So it's kind of like an example of what we've been talking about this whole conversation.
Last question here from Reddit. If you were starting Chubbies today, how would your customer acquisition strategy change? And I guess I'll add on to this. Would your first, would your strategy revolve around the in-person marketing or more so tailored towards content? Or maybe
Good
neither one of
question.
those.
No, I think it'd be both. It would be, I mean, yeah, in person, so valuable. And I don't think that changes in today, 10 years ago, 100 years in the future. Just like the amount of data you can get that you just can't capture in click-through rate or whatever is crazy. So always recommend that. But that creates a bunch of content that you can then use digitally, right? And so if I were to do it again, I mean, I think I just wouldn't give up on, or I wouldn't jump so quickly into just like, basic Facebook ads trying to get short-term purchases, like we ended up doing at Chubbies. And we lost balance and we lost sight of, because you you just start doing this thing that just seems so predictable and so whatever. You feel like a little godlike. But so I would just keep doing the stuff that, gets people to remember us. And not that we stopped doing that, but I think we just lost the relative balance of those things. But I think a lot of what we ended up doing, I mean, it was obviously a lot harder at the time, and it'll still be hard because there's always a new set of problems, and whatever the reality is in which you operate is always changing. But like, it just fundamentally keep going back to like doing things that help you rise above the noise, uh, get people to care about you, build this whatever like legitimate community of just people who feel like, they are not part of this group and they are part of this group. So that requires a bunch of like clarity on like who you are, what you stand for, what you're all about. And then just know that it's going to be a slog, know that it's going to be another decade kind of thing. Like there's no, sure, some brands, some companies sell in a couple years, but that is totally the outlier. And just great. It's beautiful. Get to work on this for the next chapter, the rest of my life kind of thing.
I think in today's social media age, that last part that you said is tough to remember because everything and seemingly in just the way our lives are constructed, everything is so quick, and everything is an instant dopamine hit. And with some of these success stories that you'll see on social media, to your point, you would think that the norm is, build a company, sell it in 6 months, and now you're multimillionaire. When that is not not the reality at all. And kind of as a counter movement to that, I've actually been thinking about starting. I don't know if this would be a series or whatever on the podcast where like I bring people on and I'm just like, all right, tell me about all your failures. Because I think everything that we see on social media too is just about successes. Like everyone is presenting their their best self. I mean, I do it too. I mean, we're all we all fall victim to it. It's human nature. We want to we do want to present our best self. That's in our best interest. But I think there'd be a lot of valuable information if I just brought on someone. I'm like, Preston, just tell me all the times that you failed and tell me all the times that you were down bad, and how did you get through it and what were some lessons. And I don't know, I've been thinking about it. I don't know, again, if it's going to be a series, maybe just like guest to guest type of interview. But yeah, it'd be cool too to like even start like a newsletter or something off of it. Just be like, hey, here's people who, instead of having people on who sold built and sold a company like Chubbies, which again, nothing wrong with it, but it's like maybe also have someone on who tried, maybe someone out there tried to do Chubbies and they failed. Maybe there was someone out there in 2010, 2011 who tried to start a short company for men and just failed terribly.
Totally.
I think there'd be a lot of lessons from that too. So
For sure.
um,
For sure.
yeah, Preston,
That's a
last
great, I
question here,
agree.
man. Yeah, last question. We'll let you go. If you could have a 30-minute conversation, and this is my question, this is not from Reddit. If you could have a 30-minute conversation with any entrepreneur athlete from history, who would it be and why?
I think and maybe people have given this answer before, but why I feel like this is the best time to be alive in the history of humanity is that like you can have all of those conversations uh, by just getting on YouTube or getting a book. You know what I mean? Like you can have these conversations, become friends with all of the people you would want to ever talk to. Charlie Munger talks about it too. Warren Buffett, just like uh, I've had all these conversations because I've read their biographies or autobiographies, kind of thing. I like for in the more like modern age or whatever. I felt like I've like sat down with Warren Buffett because I've watched like every single YouTube video on him. I feel like I've sat down with Elon and Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg and name your person, right? And because I've just heard everything they've said, and it's just such a gift that we have that information to educate us, to inspire us, to challenge us. So I guess that would be my answer.
I love it. Are you a fan of The Founders by David Senra?
For sure, for sure, for sure. Yep, listen to those.
Yeah, that reminds me of that. He does a fantastic job. But to your point, it's so cool. I mean, I we don't have to spend any time on this. I mean, it's just it's incredible. You open up YouTube, and my generation will never. I mean, we experienced a little bit of it growing up because YouTube wasn't all the way around when I was
Yep.
a young lad. But especially this generation coming up now. I mean, the fact that you can just go online, to your point, and be like, oh, I wonder what blah 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 said, or I wonder what their
Sure.
wisdom is, or I wonder what their advice is for this scenario. Like, it's just all there. Like, it's insane. And now with AI too, I mean, we'll see where all this goes, but that's just like that's the next level of now. I mean, information is no longer a barrier.
For sure. For sure. It's the best. It's really cool.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
we're very lucky that we have access to this information. So, yeah.
Yeah, I just can't imagine like being like my parents' age and like having to go to like a library to look up like a piece of data or like a fact. It's like, oh, I wonder what. But that's what they had to
Totally.
do. Like that's. I mean, I just can't even imagine a world in which you could only learn from encyclopedias. That's just crazy to me.
For sure. For sure. Pros and cons too, right? I mean, just like
Right.
then A, you got to put in the effort to get there. So then that weeds out a bunch of people who aren't going to do it. And then B, like the
True.
amount of focus that just like looking at a piece of paper in a book requires and enables is like crazy compared to just my phone,
Yep.
where I can access all the information in the world in one click. But it becomes cacophonous and chaotic and distracting.
Yeah.
So there's kind of like sometimes I'm just kind of like, I want to get the physical newspaper. I want to go to a library and just like pull out a book and sit with it for hours. But
Yeah.
but again, you just got to look at it as like, yeah, we've got all of the power at our fingertips, so let's just view it as the biggest advantage ever, and don't make bullshit excuses. Just use it as fuel and as an enabler.
Just go and do the thing. That is the takeaway from this podcast. Preston, man, can't thank you enough for your time today. This has been awesome. Like I said, big fan of Chubbies, so getting to interview one of the co-founders. Honestly, a full circle moment for me, and I know a lot of my friends are also big Chubbies fans, so I'm sure they'll enjoy some of the wisdom and advice that you shared today. Real quick though, before we sign off, where can people find
Thanks,
you and
man.
more of your work?
I mean, I think from the Chubbies perspective, chubbies.com for sure. And then in terms of what I'm doing now, marathon stuff, I try to write a lot on LinkedIn just about like everything I've learned, mistakes that I've made, to that question of like balancing performance marketing, brand building, getting going in the early days as an entrepreneur. On LinkedIn, just look up Preston Rutherford, and there's a little shorts emoji in the middle of the first and last name that allows you to make sure it's me. And then marathondataco.com is just where we it's kind of a landing page, but most people just reach out to me directly and want to learn more about what I'm up to now via LinkedIn or Twitter. So that's it.
Fantastic. We'll put all those links in the description, so make sure you go check out Marathon and go check out Preston's work on LinkedIn. Preston, can't thank you again for your time.
Thanks,
This has
man.
been amazing, and all the best.
Thank you, Nick. Grateful to have been on this with you, and I love what you're doing. I was watching your other podcasts. They're so sweet, great content. So I'm
Appreciate it,
grateful
man.
to being a small part of it.
Thank you. Thanks again.
Yeah, man.